Hello everyone, it's Rosie here, back with another video. This time I actually had a go at making some clay pins, something that has been rather trendy over the last year or so. I've been meaning to make some, not necessarily for my shop, but really just because it seems like quite a nice therapeutic process. And I thought it'd be good to document how I did it, and perhaps it'll help you out if you're looking for some different methods. I'm using an air drying clay. It's by Das. I've tested a few different air drying clays, and this is the one that is quite affordable, but also I like how it dries completely white, so it doesn't need a primer in my opinion. So yeah, it's a nice clay to work with, if a little bit fibrous, so the shapes need to be quite simple. And you know, it dries really hard, but they're still always fragile when it's an air drying clay. A lot of people like to use Fimo or polymer clays. I do like Fimo, but I find it very frustrating how much fluff can get in it. So yeah, I decided not to use it this time, but there's nothing wrong with using a polymer clay. So what I'm doing here is I rolled out a layer with a small rolling pin, but you can use pretty much anything cylindrical, that's the right term, and I cut out different shapes, and then as soon as I've cut them out I start using a bit of water and softening the edges off. It just saves me time in the sanding process if I can get them as smooth as possible. With a Fimo you wouldn't use water because it's oil based, but because Das air dry clay is I think water based, you can use water to soften the edges. I just give it a nice smooth, and I leave it to start drying. When I started this, I actually cut out a load of shapes and then went to smooth them all and found that some of them already started drying around the edges. So definitely found it much easier to cut one out and then smooth the edges and then continue doing that, which took about the same amount of time as it had the other way. So yeah, I actually did not have a plan for what I was making. I honestly cut out different shapes of what I liked, as this was not a plan to produce anything for my shop. This purely was a therapeutic, fun little thing to do. I actually just made up different shapes completely without a plan. I did a bee shape, which, you know, I love bees if you've seen any of my work, but I also just did some other shapes, some houses, and some blobs, which I kind of thought had a rough idea of what they look like. But yeah, if you're planning on making batches, definitely look into making your own cookie cutter out of tin. That'll definitely save you time if you're making a lot, or perhaps making like a little stencil. Oh, my dog is scratching at the door to get in, that's lovely. But yeah, so I would definitely think about the shapes that you're using and how to speed up this process if you're thinking of making batches of pins to sell. But for me, I just really enjoyed making completely random shapes. I in total did, I think, 12 pins, and that was a very small random batch, which would not be efficient if I wanted to sell them. So yeah, definitely think about that. But yeah, it's actually worked out quite well. I like the smoothing process, and yeah, it was good fun. I think that clay pins have become popular recently because of the nature of them being quite handmade. Enamel pins really boosted and went completely, well, they were very popular. Like a few years ago, they just went completely skyrocketed through. And I think a lot of people realised how difficult it was to get enamel pins made and the process, and wanted to find a way to make their own pins. And I think that these are a really nice way to do that, though they do take a long time and pricing them must be very tricky. So something to consider. So what I'm doing right now is I am actually using a palette knife to pick them up off the surface, and I'm putting them onto a chopping board because I tried using a greaseproof sheet or baking paper and actually it left like wrinkles on the back of them. So I found that wood was better, but you could use anything really, flat surfaces, and I left it to dry for like 3 days. The longer you can wait the better, but you got to wait till they're really solid before you can start sanding. The sanding process is only necessary if you really want them smooth in certain places. I always sand things down, and I'll say right now, please do wear a mask, because the dust fibres, you'll breathe them in, it'll give you sore throat, it's really bad for you, so definitely wear a mask. But yeah, like I just felt like it was nicer to paint them when the edges are smoother, and the smoother the job you do before they dry with the water, the less work you require doing this. What I'm doing there is I'm using a damp tissue paper to just wipe off any of the remaining dust from sanding. If I didn't do this, then the paint wouldn't adhere to the clay very well and possibly peel off, so it was worth doing this. And obviously air dry clay, unsealed air drying clay, will absorb moisture and possibly become damp again. So if they do get a little bit damp and darken in colour from the moisture, just leave them to dry for an hour or so just before you start painting. That's definitely recommended. I didn't seem to have much of an issue because I used a very barely damp cloth, but something to think about if you do that. So now I get to start painting. This is the really fun process because I didn't have much of a plan and I just wanted kind of a very on-brand colour scheme for me. One, because I really enjoy using these colours together, but also a limited colour palette makes you think more creatively about what you're doing and more in a stylistic mindset than trying to create something realistic or with lots of tonal shades. And I think that really helped me just have more fun with this than if I had gone with loads of colours, which, you know, really if you look at it, it's not that limited a colour palette, but it turned out quite cohesive in the end, with some pins that stood out a bit more than others. But yeah, I'm using Acryla Gouache because a lot of people also have used it before. I have a much better colour range of the Acryla Gouache, requires a lot less mixing. If I'd used normal acrylic paint, I would have had to mix every colour I wanted, and my acrylic paints are pretty naff. They're kind of craft basic stuff. So even though these paints are not cheap, I much more enjoy using these than I would have my naff acrylic paints. So you can use whatever paints you want. Definitely recommend that. Just, you know, it's up to you how much money you want to spend on making these, but for me this was purely for enjoyment purposes. So yeah, I actually jumped from different pin to different pin because they need to dry in between playing around with them. So something to think about is kind of what colours you're using where, and if you are using a limited colour palette, you can jump around to different areas rather than kind of waiting for every different colour to dry. And once it's dry on your palette, it's kind of wasted, so it's good to sort of spread it across. So yeah, some pins were a bit more complex than others. That diamond, yeah, I kept changing it and kept messing around with it, and there's such small spaces, and I really should have started using a smaller brush at this point, but I just kind of really liked the idea of doing a little gem. So in the end I'm really happy with that one, but it was a lot of different layers and I had to kind of leave it and take a break from it because I kept kind of working into it and the paint wasn't dry, and so you keep seeing portions of that diamond not be finished because I sort of jump to other pins. Something to note is that the acrylic gouache, if you add too much water to it, it will kind of separate a little bit with the water on these clay pins. I haven't primered these pins. If they're white, I literally just went on with a different colour. It doesn't seem to have mattered for me, but if you want to use gesso, then go for it. There's no problem with that. I just kind of wait till the area is dry if I used a bit too much water, and then I go over it again, which is what's great about these paints. They're so very opaque that you can do that. So yeah, I really had a lot of fun with these. I created some weird and strange characters, and I actually really enjoy drawing mushrooms, and I very rarely actually have. I would like to create some more characters using them, but these are probably my first mushroom characters I've done in a long time, so it was really nice to do that. I also painted a burrito, which you might see at some point coming up. I don't know why, I drew a bean and then I realised I didn't have wings to make a bee, so I thought, what else could I do? And I thought, you know what, let's do a burrito because I like burritos, what can I say? So yeah, I had a lot of fun with these. I did a couple of duplicates. I don't know why, I kind of just felt like it's easier mentally for me to kind of have pairs of some. So there's a couple of potatoes and a couple of other ones there, but yeah. At this point I took a break. I'm going to say this is a long process. You do end up doing this over a few days. If you want to do it all in one day, I don't even think you could because of the drying times, but I definitely would just give yourself a breather from it, you know, space it out. Don't try and do loads in one go. If you're planning on making these to sell, don't have a shop update planned instantly, because these take time and they're a labour of love. So, you know, it's something to think about. I had, I think, a couple of days gap because I was doing other work, and then I jumped back on them, and again it was much nicer to take that break and spend that time on it. So yeah. Also, I like doing blue line work, if you know my style. So having a gap between me doing that was quite nice. It was very relaxing doing the line art. I've added some shots here. I think I even speeded up in a little bit because there's a lot of footage and it's really satisfying to see the line art, but it's also really slow. So I'm really pedantic about the lines. So I think I speed it up very shortly, and it's like a whirlwind of line art. So, you know, be warned that it gets a little bit faster. But yeah, I had a lot of fun. These houses were super cute. I like that there's a trio of them. It kind of reminded me of beach huts in the UK, where they're all like bright coloured roofs and very simple. I wanted to create this very simplistic little houses. I actually forgot to add like a doorknob to the one with like the blue door. It just looks a little bit more like scary. But the rest of them turned out really cute, and yeah, I really enjoyed how they turned out. If I was going to make pins to sell in this way, then I think houses would be really cute, and they're actually very simple in the scheme of painting them because the majority of the colour is the base colour of the clay, which is white, so that was quite easy to do. Something I didn't really think about was what the sides and the back would look like. I did paint the sides on some like fully, and on others I painted some of the sides. Some of the line art goes onto the sides, some of it doesn't. Something to definitely think about when you're creating these is if you care about that, but it's a little bit frustrating having to paint the sides and do all these different things. So yeah, I kind of have a mishmash of line art that takes over the whole piece and line art that only takes over portions of it, which is classic Rozie, really. I do like to play around with how much line art there is, and I will never be consistent. I'm very sorry. I just go with whatever feels right for the piece. I mean, that pencil there literally has line art all over it, and then nothing else has that much line art. It's super strange. But yeah, I think they turned out really cute. The thickness is also perfect for these. They weren't super thin, so I was worried about breakage, but also they can end up too thick and bulky. So that's another thing to think about when you're rolling out your clay, is how thick does it need to be. This pin is very random. It was like a shape I wasn't really sure what it was going to be, and then when I started painting it became a tent, and then I thought, well, it's not really obvious that it's a tent, what should I put inside it? And then I thought a dog. So it's a dog going camping in a very plush pillowy tent, because why not? I mean, there's no rules here. It did turn out really cute, and a few people when I was posting on Instagram about them did say they really liked the tent one, which I'm just glad people knew it was a tent. That's just already like, yes, thank goodness I'm not just making up random shapes and hoping it looks like things. So yeah, this is the burrito. I'm actually really pleased with how it came out, but as someone that doesn't eat burritos with cheese because I'm lactose intolerant, I don't think I really know what cheese looks like. I kept drawing like V shapes as though they were little flakes of cheese, when usually the cheese is a bit more melted. I don't know, but I think it turned out cute, and it was obvious what it was, and it was a really good size for a pin. Some of these are massive, and then some of them are small, and if you're planning on wearing these, it's definitely something to think about. This big clay pin that's quite bulky, it might get knocked. The smaller probably the better with these, but yeah. This is my bee, my classic bee. I kind of knew I'd end up doing a bee. He's kind of giant. I'm not sure he needed to be that big, and oh, creaky chair, sorry. And something else that I think about with when I'm making these is the wings sit in kind of a strange place, and the eyes I would have maybe preferred if the stripes were a bit lower to give it more of a bigger face, a bit cuter. But I'm still happy with how it turned out. It was still really cute. I added some shines on it with paint, and you know, it was my first clay pin bee, so I'm sure I'll get better if I decide to make any more. But yeah, again, this one had a lot of line art. I don't know why. It's just, why not really? The mushrooms, I last minute decided to add some faces to them. They just seemed a little bit blank to me, and so I added a couple of shocked or happy faces to them, which was so tiny and ended up really cute. So yeah, I definitely need to draw more mushrooms and different characters with them. I mean, they're iconic. They're just so lovely. I don't know if you played the game Spiritfarer, but there's a really cute mushroom in that. And here they are all dried and painted, and the next step is actually glazing them. So at this point you're probably wondering, I'm not using resin, as it says in the title. I'm not using resin. Resin is super carcinogenic, very toxic, and if you want to ask questions about it, feel free. I studied using resin for my degree, so you know, I don't use it in my home if I can help it. So I'm using a triple thick Deco Art glaze, which I've used on my palettes before, and it's a really nice glaze. It's not like Mod Podge, it dries a lot shinier. You can see the streaks in it, and at this point I was doing some testing with the potato-y shape. I had this spare one left over, but I also tested it on the dog one because it was just the most random. And if you do quite a thin layer, then you can see some brush strokes, but if you do quite a thick layer and sort of not really brush it on but kind of move it around and get it covered, then it kind of settles itself out. So something to think about. I actually got some shots here of me pushing it around and not playing with it too much, just trying to cover it with the glaze, and I found that to be quite effective. It's obviously not going to be as strong as resin. Resin is a plastic. It will set solid. You can tap it and it's like, wow, this is solid. So I definitely see the appeal of using it for products that you're going to sell, but if you're planning on doing this in the safest way possible, then this glaze is water soluble. You can just literally put your brush in water and clean it off, and you know, they just turn out a lot more safe, but they're still very good quality, so I do recommend this glaze. The last thing to do is to add the backs to them. I did also glaze the sides and the backs, I should say, at this point, because again, with air drying clay you want to make sure it's entirely covered in whatever your sealant is, because again, moisture would affect them if you didn't. But yeah, I added some super glue and then some pin backs to them, which, you know, I don't know if super glue was the right glue to use. I know a lot of people use resin as an adhesive if they're using resin, so something to think about. But it does set very hard. As you can see, I did give it a bit of a wiggle, but they're always going to be temperamental with a handmade item which is made out of clay, so just something to be careful with. Definitely I dropped it, you know, because I'm so good at that, but I think they turned out really cute. They do look very handmade, but as a collection of things I made, I'm very proud of them. I had a lot of fun. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you liked what I made. Ask questions, I'm happy to help. So yeah, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye.